we got a really interesting guest for you guys, Chris Hansen. He was, of course, the host of NBC's Dateline's To Catch a Predator, and he's now hosting a podcast called Predators I've Caught. He's also hosting Hansen versus Predator. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, let me ask a quick question about the podcast, and then, of course, I want to ask you about To Catch a Predator and all the things. And
sure.
Everybody who's watched it, which is pretty much everybody on the planet, or certainly in America, at some point or another, has a series of questions, and I'm among them. So, how's the podcast different? What do you guys talk about the old cases? I assume you don't go into people's houses with an audio thing and go, "Oh yeah, I got you." No.
Exactly, we're back. The podcast is an opportunity for me to go back over some of these cases and get inside and relive them and take the listener behind the scenes of the show, and then to also find out, where is this guy today? What has he been up to? Has he stayed out of trouble? Has he gotten back into trouble? And it's been fascinating. It's really been reflective for me, especially as we go out and we start doing new predator investigations for television and for the YouTube channel. It's fascinating because so often it happens so quickly, and you're so in the moment that you don't have a chance to reflect. And this has given me the opportunity to do that. So it's been fascinating for me too.
Yeah. So I've always wondered about people's reactions, because you're catching super bad guys who are looking to have sex with underage kids, right? So I imagine that most people are cheering you on, right? But there's an element of such over-the-top public shaming that I wonder if you also had critics and how to break down. I know, of course, you don't know the percentages, but like, were the critics, a tiny amount, or was it a significant portion of folks who said the shaming is just too much?
I think it was a small percentage of people who saw the show. The reaction that I get is overwhelmingly positive. It was then, it is today, 17 years after we did the very first investigation. And I think people are genuinely behind it. And I think especially, Cenk, when we talk about the pandemic and the fact that so many more kids have spent so much time online. And you look at a recent study by the Center for Missing and Exploited Children that suggests the number of predatory approaches of children, the number of cases in the US has gone up 99% at the peak of the pandemic. And you also have to think about this. When we started these investigations, we merely had decoys in chat rooms on AOL and Yahoo. Well, today, there's been an explosion of social media platforms on which a potential predator can reach out to a child.
Yeah. So of the people that you guys caught, the most common critique you guys would get and the question you would get is it entrapment, right? And but I'm curious what your take on. Of the people that you caught, do you think that almost all of them would have done it on a different day with someone real? Or do you think most of them would have, but maybe we got a couple that wouldn't have actually done it if this opportunity had not presented itself?
I think that you see some of the younger guys who had the opportunity to meet somebody online, who didn't have the guts to do it in person. I think some of these guys, without the internet, without the opportunity to chat with people, they wouldn't necessarily offend. But I think that would be the same whether it was a child online or whether it was one of our decoys or whether it was a law enforcement decoy. I'm comfortable, based upon what I've seen and the people to whom I've spoken, that these guys would have offended, and in most cases had offended prior to surfacing in our investigations. Yeah, I'm sure there were a couple guys who it was really the first time, but I doubt in very many it would be in the low single-digit percentages, I think.
Yeah, and God, getting a lot of these guys off the street, if not every single one of them, certainly the repeat offenders, getting them off the street is a giant public service. right? So,
well, you see some of these guys, we went back and took a look at a fellow, Michael Gentile, who is the topic of Predators I've Caught this very week, came out today. This guy showed up at a house to meet a 13-year-old girl. He was 64 years old. And during the investigation, the Fairfield, Connecticut police found a hotel key in his pocket and went to the hotel, which was nearby. He had a virtual child porn studio set up, to which he wanted to take this child and create child porn, essentially. So, the damage that these guys did do before they were caught, is exponential.
So Chris, now we have an explosion of people who believe QAnon, and they believe that the Democratic leadership and Hollywood stars are leading child sex rings, etc. Now that's absurd, and they have absolutely no evidence of that. But one of the things that struck me was that people who had been abused before were more likely to be QAnon supporters, right? Because to them, it was within their experience. Oh, people in power abusing young kids. Yeah, well, sure, that happened to me. It might not have been a president, it might not have been Tom Hanks, which is of course absurd, right? But it was my uncle who had power over me, etc. So what I'm driving at is this a much, much bigger problem than we realize in America?
Well, I think it's a bigger problem than even we've found. And again, over these 17 or so years, we've exposed, more than 400 predators in all the different investigations combined in different formats. Law enforcement goes out every day. I was at CrimeCon a few weeks ago, and I presented with a law enforcement investigator who works in Ohio, and they go out, 3 or 4 times a year, and the numbers are staggering. And this is just in central Ohio. So you combine that with what's going on overseas. You combine that with, how many different social media platforms are out there right now, and the fact that we've been in a pandemic for more than a year. More kids are online more than ever before. More parents are engaged online, perhaps in the same residence, but focused on their own business. The opportunity is there, and whether it's interactive gaming or whether it's just a regular Kick or TikTok or anything like that, there's a great potential for the kids to be approached, and I think it's important that parents have this discussion at an early age with kids and make it age appropriate, of course, but start that discussion, because there isn't a way in society to really have an effective demand reduction. In the drug world, we have demand reduction, we have treatment, we have this philosophy that it's no longer a crime as much as it is a disease, addiction. And so we work it that way. But when you talk about a pedophile or a predator, it's not the most glamorous aspect of medicine. You have people who are very dedicated who do this work, who go into prisons and talk to offenders, but there's not nearly enough of it to reduce demand. So it becomes education, it becomes awareness, and it's necessary to have a dialogue, which is what I've always tried to do with any of these investigations.
And what's your sense, Chris? Do kids get molested more by folks they know? Or nowadays, because of the availability of the internet and all those different ways, people they don't know?
Historically, it's always been more by folks they know. Whether it's a relative, whether it's a friend of a relative, whether it's a person in power, a scout leader, a coach, that sort of thing. But because the stranger, the internet predator, has become so adept at grooming, the person who's a stranger, on a Wednesday may not be a stranger, by the time Friday rolls around. So you have this growing number, I think, of stranger predator activity. And it's much higher than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But historically, yes, you're absolutely right. It's more of an issue between people who know each other.
Right, and ironically now, the probably the best known person accused of child molestation and running an actual child sex ring is Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in prison now, co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein. But did you ever catch a female predator?
Never in one of our investigations. One time we had a fellow say that he was going to bring his girlfriend with, and we think it was a ruse just to try to make the target feel more comfortable. But in none of our investigations over all these years have we seen a female predator. I know it's happened. I wrote a book on the topic, several years ago, and there was a case we profiled there. But the psychiatrists tell us that when it comes to the female predator, you're more likely to see the teacher-student scenario that we've seen, played out so many times, because female predators don't like the anonymity where male predators tend to thrive on it. And so you just don't see as many in this scenario, in the scenario that we, investigate.
All right, last thing, Chris. Did you ever worry that you were in physical danger?
We had a couple times when it came close. In the moment, you don't really realize it. The whole physical structure of the set, if you will, is designed to have a barrier. But a couple times I got out from behind the barrier by mistake and came pretty close to a guy and saw him tense up. But we had good security there. I was never really too frightened about that. After the fact, you start to think, okay, this could have happened or that could have happened, or we found out later something about this guy that made you cringe. But generally speaking, I think for what we do in these investigations and how volatile it has the potential of being, which is why people like to watch it, partly, I feel we're all as safe as we can be.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it would have been different if you did it today, because now everyone has guns, and so
well, we're doing it. We were out a couple months ago doing it, and you just have to be ultra careful, and you have to. Fortunately, we have the ability to do the research and background on guys, and if we see somebody who talks about carrying a gun or even has a concealed permit or any reason to believe that they're carrying, we won't do a confrontation. The law enforcement will just take them off, and it's not worth it to have a confrontation. We took a look at a case where a guy didn't show up in the house but was arrested nearby the house, and he was a law enforcement officer who had multiple guns. He had a 38 in his pocket, which he would have had when he walked in. He had a assault rifle in the car, he had a shotgun in the car, another handgun, and 800 rounds of ammunition. So this guy, was really, really up to no good and ready for battle. What would have happened when he walked in? Who knows? We never had to face that, fortunately, because he was arrested, off property.
I want people to know they're still arrested anyway, even if Chris doesn't do a new show on them. So, right.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
So Hansen versus Predator is
the YouTube channel.
The YouTube channel, and then the new podcast is Predators I've Caught. So
correct,
and there it is. So Chris, thank you for joining us. Thank you for putting away a lot of bad guys. And I don't know whether to thank you or not for the nightmares you've given me. But
I have them too. So if that's any consolation,
right? All right, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.